All right, let's talk about something most of us never see, but many of us rely on every single day. I'm talking about underground storage tanks. You find them buried beneath gas stations, holding thousands of gallons of fuel, or tucked away at industrial sites storing all sorts of chemicals. They're even used in rural areas for septic systems and water storage. For a long time, these hidden workhorses were made of steel. Steel is tough, no doubt about it, but it has a mortal enemy lurking in the damp earth: rust. Over time, a steel tank can corrode, spring a leak, and create a real mess for the environment and a real headache for the owner. This is where our modern hero, the fiberglass tank, enters the picture. So what is this stuff? Fiberglass, or more technically fiber-reinforced plastic, FRP, is a marvel of modern material science. Think of it like this: you take incredibly strong but flexible glass fibers and you embed them in a durable plastic resin. It's a bit like making reinforced concrete, where steel rebar strengthens the concrete. The result is a material that is surprisingly strong, incredibly durable, and, most importantly for our story, completely immune to rust. It doesn't care about moisture or corrosive soils. These tanks are designed to last for decades without breaking down, keeping their contents safely contained and the surrounding ground safe and clean, which is a job we can all appreciate. The benefits are pretty clear. For anyone who needs to bury a large container and forget about it for a few decades, fiberglass is a fantastic choice. It eliminates the single biggest point of failure for old steel tanks. This means less risk of contaminating groundwater with fuel or chemicals, which is a huge win for everyone. It's the kind of innovation that makes a dirty job a lot cleaner in the long run. They are precisely engineered to withstand the pressure of the earth around them and the weight of vehicles that might drive over them. But like any hero, these tanks have a vulnerability, a sort of kryptonite that comes from one of their biggest strengths. And that brings us to the heart of the matter. These tanks are designed for a specific environment, buried in dry, stable ground, but the world isn't always dry and stable. Sometimes the ground gets saturated with water, and that's when the very thing that makes these tanks great, their lightweight nature, can suddenly become a big problem. It's a classic case of a solution for one problem creating a new, unexpected challenge. Understanding this challenge is the first step in appreciating why a simple pile of rocks can be the difference between a successful installation and a costly, muddy disaster. One of the biggest selling points for a fiberglass tank, besides its resistance to rust, is its weight. Compared to a steel tank of the same size, a fiberglass tank is significantly lighter. This is a huge advantage when it comes to getting the tank from the factory to the job site and then into the ground. You don't need a monstrous crane to lift it, and a smaller crew can maneuver it into place. This saves time, it saves fuel, and it saves money on installation day. From a logistics standpoint, being lightweight is a massive win. It simplifies the whole process and makes the job less of a heavy-duty, back-breaking affair. This lightness also means the tank is less likely to settle and shift over time, assuming the ground beneath it is properly prepared. A heavy steel tank can compact the soil underneath it, leading to tilting or sinking, which can put stress on the connected pipes and fittings. A fiberglass tank, by contrast, sits more gently in its earthen bed. It's a feature, not a bug. The manufacturers have engineered these tanks to be strong enough to handle the load from above without needing the sheer mass of steel. It's a testament to smart design, using advanced materials to achieve the same goal with less brute force. But here's the flip side, the other edge of that sword. While being light is great when you're moving it, it can be a serious liability once the tank is in the ground, especially in places where the ground gets wet. I'm talking about areas with a high water table, which is just a fancy way of saying the ground is saturated with water, not too far below the surface. This is common near coasts, rivers, or in low-lying areas that see a lot of rain. In these conditions, the lightweight nature of the fiberglass tank goes from being a blessing to a potential curse. You see, a big, empty, lightweight tank buried in wet ground starts to behave less like a stable storage container and more like a giant, hollow boat. The very ground that is supposed to hold it in place can turn into its enemy. The water in the soil creates an upward force, a powerful, relentless push that wants to lift the tank right out of its grave. This is where the simple physics of buoyancy comes into play, and ignoring it is a recipe for a very bad and very expensive day on the job. The tank doesn't know it's supposed to stay put. It only knows that it's light and there's water trying to push it up. To understand what happens to a tank in wet ground, you don't need a degree in physics. You just need to have taken a bath. Think about a toy boat, or even just an empty plastic bottle in the bathtub. When you push it under the water, what happens? You can feel the water pushing back, trying to force the object up to the surface. The deeper you push it, the harder it pushes back. This upward force is called buoyancy. It's a fundamental principle of nature, first figured out by an ancient Greek guy named Archimedes, supposedly while he was in his own bathtub. The rule he discovered is surprisingly simple. The upward force on an object submerged in water is equal to the weight of the water that the object pushes out of the way. Let's break that down. Imagine your empty tank is buried in the ground. It takes up a certain amount of space, let's say 10,000 gallons worth. If groundwater rises and surrounds that tank, the tank has displaced 10,000 gallons of water. Now, water is heavy. A gallon of water weighs about 8.34 pounds. So 10,000 gallons of water weighs a whopping 83,400 pounds. That means the water is pushing up on that tank with over 40 tons of force. Now, let's look at the tank itself. A 10,000 gallon fiberglass tank might only weigh about 4,000 pounds. So you have an upward force of 83,400 pounds pushing on an object that weighs only 4,000 pounds. It's not a fair fight. Unless something is holding that tank down, it's going to float. It has no choice. The math is undeniable. The force pushing up is vastly greater than the force of gravity pulling the tank down. This is the bathtub conundrum on a massive industrial scale. The ground becomes a giant tub, and the tank becomes the toy boat. This is the hidden danger that installers have to account for. It's not about the weight of the dirt on top of the tank when it's dry. It's about the immense power of water when it shows up to the party. The weight of dry soil on top might not be enough to counteract that massive, buoyant force. This is why the installation process is so critical. You have to anticipate the worst-case scenario, a completely saturated hole with an empty tank in it, and design a system to fight back against Archimedes' principle. So what actually happens when the water rises and that buoyant force takes over? Well, it's not pretty. The tank, which was once settled securely in its hole, begins to lift. This isn't a gentle, slow ascent. It's a powerful surge driven by tons of force. As the tank pushes upward, it can heave the ground above it, cracking pavement, asphalt, or concrete pads. Imagine a gas station forecourt, smooth and level one day, and buckled into a giant, expensive speed bump the next. That's the kind of damage we're talking about. The tank literally tries to claw its way out of the ground. The damage isn't just cosmetic. Remember, these tanks aren't just sitting in a hole by themselves. They are connected to a network of pipes. There are fill pipes for putting product in, vent pipes to let air escape, and product lines that carry the fuel or chemical to where it's needed. When a tank that weighs several thousand pounds starts to float, it takes all that plumbing with it. Pipes will bend, joints will crack, and seals will break. This can lead to dangerous leaks of whatever the tank is holding, which is the very catastrophe the tank was installed to prevent in the first place. In the most dramatic cases, a tank can float completely out of the ground. I've seen pictures of it. After a period of heavy rain and flooding, a giant fiberglass tank can be left sitting awkwardly on the surface or tilted at a crazy angle, half in and half out of its hole, like some kind of strange landlocked whale. The excavation is ruined, the pipes are mangled, and the tank itself might even be damaged from the stress. What you have at that point is not a storage system. You have a massive, expensive, and hazardous cleanup job. The cost to fix this kind of failure is astronomical. The irony is that the tank was doing exactly what physics told it to do. It's the installation that failed. This isn't the tank's fault. It's a failure to respect the powerful, unseen forces at play beneath our feet. It highlights a critical lesson for any job. You have to understand the environment you're working in. You can't just dig a hole, drop in a tank, and hope for the best. You have to plan for the wet days, for the floods, for the moment when the ground itself turns against you, because if you don't, you're just burying a ticking time bomb. This brings us to our unsung hero, a carefully chosen pile of rocks. The solution to the floating tank problem is to hold it down with enough weight to counteract that powerful, buoyant force. The most common and effective way to do this is with the right kind of backfill material, and that material is clean, crushed, angular gravel. It might not sound very high-tech, but this specific type of stone does several incredibly important jobs at once. First and foremost, it provides the necessary weight, or what engineers call ballast, to keep the tank in its place. When you fill the hole around and on top of the tank with this gravel, you are essentially creating a massive heavy anchor that envelops the tank. Unlike native soil, which can have varying densities and can get soggy and light, the weight of gravel is consistent and predictable. A thick layer of this gravel over the top of the tank can easily weigh tens of thousands of pounds, more than enough to win the fight against buoyancy. The weight of the gravel and the friction between the stones and the tank hold it down securely, even when the surrounding ground is completely saturated with water. But the gravel does more than just add weight. The spaces between the individual stones allow water to drain freely. This is crucial. It prevents water pressure from building up directly against the tank's shell. Water can flow down and away through these gravel beds, relieving the hydraulic pressure. Furthermore, the angular shape of the stones is important. The crushed, sharp-edged pieces lock together, creating a stable, self-compacting layer that won't settle over time. This provides uniform support all around the tank, preventing any single point from bearing too much stress, which protects the tank's structural integrity. So not just any rock will do. You can't just use a pile of smooth, round river stones. They would act like marbles, allowing the tank to shift and settle. And you certainly can't use sand or the dirt you dug out of the hole, as it will hold water and won't provide that stable, interlocking structure. The specification is usually for something like pea gravel or crushed stone of a specific size, typically 1/8 to 3/4 of an inch with no fine particles or dirt mixed in. It's a prescription for a reason. This specific type of gravel is the key ingredient that turns a simple hole in the ground into a secure, long-lasting engineered system. At the end of the day, it all comes down to a simple choice. Do the job right the first time, or risk having to do it all over again, but with a much bigger price tag. A proper installation using the specified gravel backfill might seem more expensive up front. You have to pay to haul away the native soil you excavated, and you have to pay to bring in truckloads of specialized gravel. For a contractor looking to save a few bucks on a bid, this can be a tempting corner to cut. They might think, the ground here is pretty dry, I'll just use the soil I dug out. What could go wrong? This is a classic example of being penny-wise and pound-foolish. Using the native soil, especially if it's clay or silt, is a terrible idea. That kind of soil holds water like a sponge. When it gets wet, it loses its structural integrity and its weight. Even worse, sharp rocks or debris in the excavated soil can create pressure points against the tank, potentially damaging it over time. This shortcut might save a little money on day one, but it sets the stage for a catastrophic failure down the road. The cost of excavating a failed tank, repairing the broken pavement and pipes, and reinstalling it correctly will dwarf the initial savings many times over. In extremely high-risk areas where the water table is permanently high or there's a serious risk of flooding, engineers will often call for even more protection. In addition to the gravel backfill, they might specify concrete anchors. This involves pouring massive concrete blocks or a thick slab into the bottom of the excavation before the tank is even placed. The tank is then strapped down to these anchors with heavy-duty fiberglass straps. This provides the ultimate defense against buoyancy, physically tying the tank to a weight it could never hope to lift. It's an extra layer of insurance for the most challenging job sites. The lesson here is clear, and it applies to more than just burying tanks. The hidden forces, the things you can't see, like groundwater pressure, are often the most dangerous. A professional, experienced installer understands these risks. They follow the manufacturer's instructions to the letter, they use the right materials, and they don't cut corners. Paying for that expertise and those materials isn't an expense. It's an investment in safety, reliability, and peace of mind. Because the dirtiest job of all is cleaning up a mess that could have and should have been avoided from the start.